The resurrection is, in Christian tradition, the moment when, on the third day after his crucifixion, Jesus rises from his tomb, transfigured into a new life beyond death, but still bearing the wounds of his crucifixion in his hands, feet, and side. No one was there to see it, and so artists can only imagine this event. All we have recounted in the Bible are later encounters with the risen Jesus. But Christians believe that this event of the resurrection signals a victory over death. Death can't hold Christ. Though he is dead, and we see the evidence of that on that slab, which we can just see inside the tomb, he breaks free of it. And in doing so, he promises that this is possible for all people, that what he has pioneered is something that all people can hope for at the end of their own lives.
That sense of triumph is expressed by Giovanni Bellini in this artwork, especially in the way that Jesus holds that flag of the resurrection. It's a symbol of triumph, isn't it? And you can see that his grave clothes are flying around him and up into the air, so there's this sense of this movement upwards. It's appropriate that Giovanni Bellini painted this work in the 1470s for a funerary context. He painted this for the Zorzi family chapel, for a church of San Michele, which is on an island in Venice. And in fact, the entire island is given over to a cemetery. So you can imagine the family choosing this subject very carefully for their funerary chapel as an aspiration of their own life after death.
You mentioned the Venetian context for this work. And that's interesting because Venice is positioned on the eastern side of Italy, nearest to the world of Eastern Orthodox Christianity, the sort of Christianity that flourished further east. And one of the typical ways of representing this moment in Eastern Orthodox icons is to show the tomb, as it's described in the Bible, as hewn into the rock, whereas much Italian art of the time tends to show the resurrection happening out of a sort of stone coffin or sarcophagus. And another very important feature of Eastern Orthodox icons of the resurrection is the shroud, the grave clothes that Christ's body was wrapped in. The Bible describes them as having been left in the tomb, but Bellini has maintained that interest in the shroud, but as you just said, he's allowed the shroud to rise too, along with Christ's body. And there it is, animated by a rather mysterious and energetic wind, perhaps not even of an earthly origin, but in that animation, the material, the cloth itself, is reflecting something about the new life that is also animating Christ's body.
Absolutely. It seems to contrast here with one of the only other moments of that bright white in this painting by the figure seated below him. He too is almost naked and wrapped in just a little bit of white cloth, and you can see it's even wrapped around his hand. And he seems to be here almost a foil. He bends his arm in a similar sort of way as Christ. So we have a kind of celestial comparison here with the earthly. And perhaps there is some suggestion that this man too will be resurrected after his death.
The fact that he's rising up into the air, as you pointed out, is a little bit odd, I have to say, in biblical terms, because the resurrection and the ascension of Christ are very distinct things in the biblical story. He rises, and then 40 days later, he ascends into heaven. Mm-hmm. Here, Bellini's rolled them into one, but both, in a sense, have that sense of a victory.
It's true that in the history of art, when you see the resurrection, you more often see the figure of Jesus just stepping out of his tomb, on top of it, with the flag of the resurrection. So Bellini here has been exceptionally innovative, and we can imagine that we, placed in front of this altarpiece, are almost looking up too at this rising figure of Jesus. And there's an extraordinary moment where his feet rise just above the horizon line of the landscape. And if you've ever been to the Veneto area of Italy, you can see that Bellini is evoking the landscape around his native town. And so he's actually situated this miraculous event in his own area, as if this is reoccurring for us in front of it. And you can also notice a very signature Bellini motif here, which is that he's understood that this event took place in the early morning, and the sun is rising, and it's just catching the underside of those clouds in this beautiful pink.
Through a new day, we see a new beginning, a new life. I loved what you said about the echo, the visual echo between the left arm of Christ and the left arm of the man seated down here at the bottom. And there's another visual echo, I think, between the raised right arm of Christ and the raised right arm of the soldier who looks up at him here at bottom left. And in both cases, I think those visual echoes affirm a link, a bond between the divine human figure rising up, pioneering, leading, opening this pathway to heaven, and the ordinary human beings below, because this too will be a pathway they tread. And it's what happens to ordinary human beings when they are raised that we're going to look at in our next film, which is about the Last Judgment.